everyone, and welcome back to Thread Talks, a podcast where we talk all about the fashion industry and why it might be more important than you think, but less glamorous than it seems. In today's episode, as you would have probably guessed based on the time of the year, is going to be a big 2024 final fashion report. Originally, I just wanted to do a big final report of everything that happened in the fashion industry in 2024. But when I was doing my research, I stumbled upon I think it's called State of Fashion 2024, which, for those who don't know, that's a final report, or it's actually not a final report, it's a report of predictions for what's going to happen in the fashion industry. It's made by McKinsey and Business of Fashion, which are two very reliable companies that make fashion statistics, and Business of Fashion doesn't really do fashion statistics, but McKinsey does, and Business of Fashion obviously focuses on the business of fashion, as you would guess from the name of it. And they annually, I think they do it they started doing it in 2017, or for the 2017, annually make a report of predictions for the fashion industry based on a survey and based on what happened in the previous year. And as I was reading through the one that came out last year, so the predictions for this year, I thought it would be quite interesting to read through it and kind of compare of what came true and how accurate those predictions were. I also want to say that the full report has 150 pages around that, and you can download it, but when I try to, you have to create an account with McKinsey, and that is for free. However, when you try to make the account, it asks you a question like what organization you work for, and if you're a student, and for what purposes you're getting the account or the subscription. And I am not entirely sure if me saying that I've got a relatively small podcast is gonna be worth it enough for them to allow me to have the access to it. So I only read the article that comes out each year with the report, which does come out on the McKinsey website and on Business of Fashion. Essentially, they are two of the same articles, but I will link them down below. Anyway, both of the articles are essentially like a little summarization of what sum up. You okay? Essentially, both of the articles are summarization of the final report of the full version, and in both of them they point out 10 points that they think is going to be the most important for 2024. And the article published at McKinsey's also divides all these 10 points into 3 brackets. So I thought we can go through it and then, based on each bracket, conclude whether it came through and how accurate those predictions were, because I thought it would be quite fun. Once we go through all the predictions, I will also talk about what else happened in the fashion industry in 2024, about some significant things that happened, and I will talk about how they might connect to what we already will talk about, or what we already talked about. Grammar. Let's begin. So the first bracket is called Global Economy, and although it's called Global Economy, it talks about 2 things, which first is what the fashion executives fear or think will be the biggest factor that will negatively impact the fashion industry in 2024. And the second one, which is why I said that although it's called Global Economy, I don't really understand why they're talking about this. It's more of a global environmental issue, which is sustainability. To be specific, it's called climate urgency. Anyway, let's start with the first one, which is also a little intro to the whole article, or I guess to the whole report as well. And that is what the statistics say, what the fashion executives fear the most. And the first one is, I don't remember, so I will have to look. The first one is geopolitical instability. 62% of the executives reported in the survey that's always conducted in September by Business of Fashion. I believe it's Business of Fashion. I'm actually not entirely sure if it's Business of Fashion or if it's McKinsey's that conduct the survey, but I'm fairly certain it's Business of Fashion. Anyway, I'm sorry if I'm wrong. And 62% of the executives, as I said, reported that they think that the biggest problem that will negatively impact fashion industry is geopolitical instabilities. And that means, or why they thought so, is because of the international conflicts that we are having, that we always have, and we've had for years. And why they think this will affect the fashion industry is what I believe a lot of people might not realize, and that is that obviously if there's a conflict somewhere, there's lots of restrictions around the country, and that means that they can't transport things, they can't resource materials and fabrics in the certain country they can't use the workforce that they would normally use in the country, or they maybe can, but the transport would be geographically, the transport would be limited because of the positions of the countries that are in a conflict. So this is something that I fully understand why they're scared of and why they think will negatively impact the industry. But it's also something that nicely shows that fashion industry is still just an industry, and it's still impacted by things that other industries are impacted by. Now, to confirm whether that is true or not, or whether the prediction became true, I haven't found enough data. However, what I did find was the report for 2025, the predictions for 2025. And that one, interestingly enough, does talk. Actually, that one is very depressing if you read it. The intro is very depressing. And it talks about how the biggest problem this year was, in fact, inflation. The report quite literally says consumers affected by the recent period of high inflation are increasingly price sensitive. There is also the surprising rise of dupes, the acceleration of climate change, and the continued reshuffling of global trade. Regional differences, which came into focus in 2024, will become even staker in the coming year. I absolutely love that they're surprised by the rise of dupes, because they just said it themselves that obviously high inflation affected everyone, and people are increasingly price sensitive. I love the name price sensitive, and we will be actually talking about this later in this episode, so I will not dive deeply into this. But what I just want to say about the rise of dupes is that why I think that is not only because of obviously the price range, because more and more professionals educate people online on the sustainability and on how even expensive things can be cheaply made, and how just because something's expensive doesn't mean it's much of a higher quality than something that's less expensive. Essentially talking about how you're paying for the brand, you're not paying for the quality of the product. So I believe a lot of people now understand that if you're buying a dupe of something, you might actually be spending money not only because saving money not only because you saved money because it's cheaper, but also because the quality can be actually even higher, or it can be the same. So I believe the rise of dupes isn't only because of the financial part of it, but also because of the knowledge that we now have when it comes to the quality of garments and accessories, whatever you name it. What else it says in this very depressing intro is essentially that all that we feared last year has now materialized, which, yes, clearly, but I will be talking about this later, about how some things actually did come true and some things are actually better. So I'm not sure why they're so depressing in this intro. It says essentially, and that's my favorite sentence, which kind of sums it all, and it's 2025 is likely to be a time of reckoning for many brands. Love that. As I said, I will be talking more about this later. I think I should have actually end this episode with this intro, because it's quite, although it's on the first place on the list, it kind of sums up everything else. But they were up there first and I just went as it was written, so yep. The second one in this bracket is called Climate Urgency, and it talks about how the frequency and intensity of extreme weather-related events really shows that there is a climate crisis and how the fashion industry really needs to step their game right now. I have to say it made me laugh a little bit because it's something so obvious, but the way it was written kind of makes it seem like fashion industry needs to wake up now, because now it's really urgent. Now we have to do something, as if like this problem hasn't been a problem that we spoke about as well for years and years prior. So I just thought it was quite funny. And there's also another one, sustainability and environment related, later on, and I will talk about whether that happened or not later in this episode, because I think there's going to be a better opportunity to talk about it. But I also think with these two specific issues or predictions, it's not even a question of whether they came true or not, but it's more important or interesting to see them and see the fashion industry beyond the nice clothes and the fabulousness of it. that it always represents itself to be. There's a whole lot of business that obviously gets affected by loads and loads of factors, as any industry does. Anyway, now to the second bracket, which is called consumer shifts. This one, obviously, as you would have guessed, focuses on the consumers. However, there's also one point which does slightly, it does, but also about fashion. Anyway, first one is called vacation mode, and it talks about how lots of people will travel in 2024 more than ever since the pandemic, and because of that, they will shop more clothes and for the specific vacation that they're going for. But there is also a chance of them, if they travel for a longer time, they will probably buy things from different places. And it talks about how brands should think now about the distribution and also about the category marketing, so how well they are prepared for each category when it comes to clothing. The second one is called the new face of influence, and this one also made me laugh a little bit because it talks about how the influencers are changing, or not the influencers but the influencer craze, I guess, and who is popular now, so obviously the brands have to catch up. And it says that the brands should emphasize video, but I think that is a bit outdated because yes, obviously there's been fashion marketing or fashion influencer marketing in the sense of lookbooks where people just take picture on Instagram, but I believe there's also a lot of, like, the OG, it started with YouTube videos, and even nowadays there's lots of reels on TikTok and Instagram and even YouTube, like YouTube Shorts, where people just show their lookbook or show what they're wearing. There's not a whole lot of pictures, like still images, now being used as for the marketing. So saying that we have to, or the brands have to emphasize the video, seems a bit outdated to me, as I said at the beginning. But what I personally found it funny because I know about it, but I thought it was quite a calling out the fashion industry, is that they also said that the brands should lose their expectations, and they should, or not the expectations, but the control they have over the actual creative process, and they should let the creatives just be creative. And although I feel like today the influencer job is a lot more transparent, a lot more people know what it actually contains and what it actually is, I think it's still a bit unknown, or a lot of people don't realize that when an influencer makes a content, they send, when it's a paid content as an advertisement, they send it to the client, and the client says yes or no, and then when they agree with what the content is, they can publish it. So I thought it was quite funny just to point out that the brands should really do, or should really let influencers do their job and not really talk to them to what they're doing. Don't know if that was an English sentence, but you get me, hopefully. And the third one is called Outdoors Reinvented. And I found this one very interesting because I will read you the first sentence that there is in the article. Technical outdoor clothing and Gorpcore are in demand as consumers embrace healthier lifestyle. In 2024, more outdoor brands are expected to launch their lifestyle collections. At the same time, lifestyle brands will likely embed technical elements into collections, blurring the lines between functionality and style. And I find this interesting because, they say here that consumers embrace healthier lifestyle, but I'm not sure if I just didn't write it down or if it was in the other article in the Business of Fashion, but either or, they were saying that this is because of the pandemic, and it's because obviously after pandemic people want to be healthier and want to move more, which is true, but it would more explain the skyrocket in the sportswear in 2022, I believe it was. But saying this now and saying that the consumers will embrace healthier lifestyle without really telling why seems a bit weird, because 2024 was a huge year for sports. We had the Olympics, we had the Euros, we had the hockey tournaments, but what was it called? I don't know, but my country won. Anyway, the Paris Olympics were probably the biggest, well, they were the biggest event, but they were also the biggest influence on the fashion industry when it comes to sportswear, because they were the first Olympics to feature equal amount of female and male athletes, creating the equal opportunities for both female clothing brands and male clothing brands, or more like collections, not brands, to appeal to both of the genders, which obviously means more people will buy. I will read you a little bit of a report that I found on sportswear in the 2024, which I will also link down below. I will link all the articles and sources that I mentioned and that I used to make this episode down below. Anyway, it says, where is it? The major success and substantial social media following of staff athletes like US gymnast Simone Biles and Japanese skateboarder Koko Yoshizawa indicate a huge potential for female athletes as brand ambassadors in beauty, fashion, luxury, and other sectors in the years to come. Brands like Miel, Organics, and Glossier are already tapping WNBA players and college athletes like Angel Reese, with Hollywood icon Zendaya representing on AG alongside Roger Federer. In future, as female consumers are increasingly interested in longevity, wellness, and technology to help them achieve their health goals, the lines between sports, fashion, and women's health will further blur. So we can see that this prediction really came true, and the sportswear and outdoors wear as well really became big in 2024. However, it wasn't because of COVID anymore, and maybe just a little bit, but it was mostly because of the Olympics. And I find it a bit strange that they didn't mention the Olympics in the actual report, because obviously the Olympics are gonna come. They come every 4 years. And it also taps the new phase of influence, because as I said before, the influencers are changing, and now, as they said in the report, and as we saw, because we all saw the Zendaya campaign, as we saw, Simone Biles and other athletes are becoming sort of influencers, because the consumers are now wanting influencers that have something to say, and it's not just about someone being pretty online, no offense to anyone. So this was also true in a sense, but I'm not entirely sure if they expected this shift to be in this sort of, I don't think they expected them to kind of connect and become one, but these two predictions were accurate. And the vacation mode is also in a sense related to this, because as I said, this all are talking about consumer shifts, so they're all sort of correct, but the vacation mode seems a bit random, to be completely honest with you. I'm not sure if people are traveling more. I haven't seen any data on this, and from my personal experience, I don't think people are traveling any more than they did a year ago, so that was a bit off. But in a sense, with stating that brands and retailers should rethink the category marketing and strategies, then that was quite correct, because obviously of the rise of sports. So that's my take on the consumer shifts from this report. And we have arrived to the biggest bracket and the final one, which is called Fashion Systems, which, as you can guess, is about the fashion. The first one is called Generative AI's Creative Crossroads, and it talks about how AI is becoming really big, and we need to learn how to use it effectively, because what it says here, it doesn't really talk about where this is coming from. It just says that because of the breakout in 2023, more use cases are emerging across the industry when it comes to AI. But what it talks about later is that creatives everyone in the fashion industry should learn to use AI so it benefits you and it makes your life easier, but it doesn't take away your creativity. From what I understand from this very brief explanation of what they're trying to say, is that the industry needs to learn how to use AI in things where they don't have to be overly creative. But when it comes to the creative process of making garments, obviously that's, AI can't, in my opinion, AI can't really ever take our place in this, because we've all seen the random, weird, unprecise pictures that are created by AI where you have 6 fingers instead of 5. So I believe that's what they're trying to say. And I haven't found enough data. I actually haven't found any data on anyone talking about this specifically, about like how it is in 2024. So I believe this is still something that's progressing, and it's gonna continue to be a goal in 2024, because if you think about it, AI is still incredibly new, and it's going to take years for someone to perfect it and for us to perfect how to use it. The second one is fast fashion's power play, and this one together with other one is just delicacy, because in this one they talk about how fast fashion will come even fiercer than ever, quite literally is what it says, and challengers led by Shein and Temu are bringing new tactics on prices, customer experience and speed. And so for this reason, they predict that fast fashion is going to be on rise and it's going to take the lead. However, then there's another point, and I think this is really well placed because it's not directly below this. There's another point and then there's this point, and that calls sustainability rules. And it literally says, across jurisdiction, new rule will have significant effects on both consumers and fashion players. Brands and manufacturers might consider revamping business models to align with the changes ahead. So how did they expect to have new rules when it comes to sustainability and manufacturing and all, and have fast fashion taking the lead? Because surely that contradicts itself, because fast fashion is called fast fashion because it's fast, it literally says in there, and it's not sustainable whatsoever. That's the whole issue with fast fashion. It's because it's not sustainable, it's terrible for the environment. So I'm not entirely sure how they expected that both to happen. But spoiler alert, sustainability rules, that point happened. I'm not sure about fast fashion because we had the famous French sustainability tax. I'm not sure if it's called that way, actually. I have a whole podcast episode on this. However, in short, this year in France, they put tax on fast fashion, on the fast fashion materials, on the fast fashion tactics and operations. And they did this to obviously decrease the production of fast fashion and the production of the selling of fast fashion in France. As I said, I have a whole podcast on it. If you're interested, again, will be linked down below. But I find this interesting because, well, I find it interesting that they chose to say that there will be two things that quite literally both of them can't happen at once. And I mean, what could happen? And what could happen was fast fashion having new strategies and having new marketing, fair, but to actually lead and to take the lead, as I said, the industry and become more popular and start selling more when there's the sustainability aspect and sustainability jurisdictions and, the world taking it a lot more seriously. I don't know why they thought that both of them could work together. And as I said, the sustainability one did happen. We had the law, and I think that's an amazing step forward. Anyway, we did skip one, and that is All Eyes on Brands, which talks about marketing and about how brand marketing is going strong again. It talks about how brands will benefit from creating long-term emotional connections with the consumer, which is self-explanatory. And I want to say that this also did happen this year. The Business of Fashion published an article called The Best of Business of Fashion 2024, Rewriting the Direct-to-Consumer Playbook. And it talks about how even the small brands and startups that really took the consumer data and used it and applied it grew, because, as I said, this year wasn't really great for the fashion industry, as pretty much any other year before. But some of the brands really did manage to grow and start their businesses based on the data. It talks about how, for example, they opened stores in the regions where they already have a big following, or how there was one significant one I'll find. Yeah, there's one that talks about a shoemaker called La Rode. I write it down because I have absolutely no clue how to pronounce it. I'm really sorry. But they grew their sales and profits because they introduced products that were based on materials and silhouettes that they already knew was selling very well, so they kind of recycled it. It also explains the importance of events, live events, and engaging content, which we already talked about before. So again, we see the connections from the previous points, or with the previous points. And it also talks about how even established brands like Levi's or Calvin Klein are adapting these new marketing strategies and how it works, and how it's very clear what the consumers want now. And there is also a very interesting sentence that I will also read to you, because it again is connecting to the fast fashion power play, or whatever it was called. And that is, the Dupes brand that mainly appeal to shoppers who can't afford luxury but won't buy Shein, such as Italic, are also looking to create brand identities separate from their affordable price tags. So this one really talks about how dupe brands is on a rise because of the price range, but how they are actually now trying not to be popular because they are cheaper, but because of their brand identity. But mainly, I wanted to say this sentence because it clearly shows that Shein is not as popular anymore as it once was. I mean, it's still hugely popular with many people, but I also genuinely feel like with this whole report, the fashion industry seems to be finally catching up with the customer demands, and we do all know that fashion industry in a lot of senses is a bit slow, and it has a hard time to catching up because God knows why, probably because it's so fancy and so sort of stuck up with being so great and glamorous and all that. It has sometimes hard times to keep up with the changes that are in the consumer behavior, but finally they seem to be, and it's great. And I feel like because I just said that, no one will ever hire me in this industry, but hey ho, it's the truth. The last one, I will just read the whole thing because I can't really pronounce that without reading it for some reason, but the last point is called bullwhip snaps back. See, I can't even say it when I read it. The last point of the fashion system and of the whole predictions is called bullwhip snaps back. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that, read that whatsoever, but it essentially explains that because of the consumer demand for sustainability and for transparency, fashion brands and retailers now need to ask for this transparency, and the suppliers will be faced with the pressure from retailers and brands because they now focus on transparency and strategic partnerships. I didn't find enough data to confirm this point. However, it kind of supports my view and my opinion that the fashion industry is finally catching up on what we actually want as consumers. And I think it's a great prediction, and I really hope it did become a bit more true. Although we did have loads and loads of explosion videos, explosion articles about how even luxury brands are operating as fast fashion, which isn't really hopeful. But I believe that with how much we as consumers are loud about this and how we really do change the demand, we are up to a better start for the next year, not just year, for next years and hopefully decades and hopefully forever eventually. Okay, I think we went through quite a lot and we summed up what happened in 2024 quite well. However, it wouldn't be complete and proper without mentioning thing that made, or series of events that made this year unforgettable and like none before when it comes to fashion industry, and that is the ever-changing creative directors. Because in no year before we had so many exits and new assignments and changing of creative directors as much as we did this year. For those who just came to fashion, years before, not years before, even a decade ago, creative directors were the image of the brand. They were the ones who designs the clothes, which obviously, what is a fashion brand known for? The garments. Self-explanatory. And it was really, really normal for them to stay on the position for ages. It's seen, being a creative director is seen like as the top. It's definitely the top in the fashion design. It's seen as the top of the fashion industry for any professions, I feel like. And it used to be so once you got the job, you wanted to keep it. Designers like Karl Lagerfeld, for example, I think that's a great example. His name is associated with Chanel. From the modern ones is Olivier Rousteing for Balmain. It's inseparable. You think of Olivier Rousteing, you think of Balmain. Or Phoebe Philo for Celine, even though she wasn't there for particularly long, it's only been 5 years, or it was only 5 years. It was still so significant that everyone remembers her as a designer for Celine. And this year has just been so quick compared to the past that really we have to ask why, what's happened. And after doing my research, no one really knows, and no one can really pinpoint one reason onto why the fashion directors are being changed so quickly. However, what has been repeatedly said is that nowadays the creative director doesn't have to be just a designer. Well, he's not just a designer anymore. That's the first thing. He doesn't even have to be a designer, really. Because if we look at Pharrell Williams for Louis Vuitton, he's not a fashion designer. And he himself said he's not a fashion designer. He is a creative director. So nowadays, the fashion designers also sort of have to be entrepreneurs. They have to be influencers in a way. They have to be known, because it's because of the marketing. It brings the attention to the brand if the designer is significant. And it often feels like now we are more focused on the attention around the brand rather than the actual clothes. We have seen it so many times where we speculate that brands might have done something intentionally that brought them negative attention, but they just did it so they have the attention, which is, I mean, you can have your own opinion on this, but this is probably why the creative directors are being changed so quickly, because it's not just about their skills anymore, their skills as a designer. And I can imagine that it must be so hard and so demanding for them that they either want to change or they just can't keep up. But in some of the articles that I read, it said that Rome hasn't been built in one day, and so we can't really expect a designer to prove themselves after 1 or 2 years or seasons, because obviously it takes time. It takes time for the designer to adapt to the new brand or to the tone of the brand and also show their personality. So this change, someone also called this a bridge designers. I believe that's what they call it, or bridge directors, because they create a bridge between the founder of the brand and the next big designer, like between Coco Chanel and Karl Lagerfeld. Anyway, that's it from me for today. I think it was a long episode and I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun researching all these things, actually, so I hope you had as much fun as I did recording this. I feel very sorry for my amazing boyfriend who will edit this video. He is he volunteered, and good luck, babe. What was the sudden change of light? I don't know, but I apologize for this. I also wanted to thank you very much. Thank you, every one of you, for being incredibly supportive and for being here, because we have 346 subscribers at this very moment and over 25,000 views altogether. And for me, that's incredible. I know for some people it's really, really little, but for me, who doesn't share this anywhere, and not a lot of people know I have a podcast, like a lot of people around my immediate circle, I think it's amazing that we managed to reach this much. No!